Okay, I'm going to kick us off. We have a lot to get through, so we'll start right on time. Welcome everyone to this session on what is humanities research now. I'm Rebecca Springer of Ithaka S+R. I'm joined by my colleagues Julie Frick-Wade of the Modern Language Association, Angela Courtney of Indiana University, Melissa Jones of Georgetown University. It's great to see all of you. I see a comment about no audio. I've found that sometimes you have to pop out the Zoom window and open it that way, and then you'll have audio. So see if that works. This presentation is going to focus on a 2-year-long research project that was conducted by Ithaka S+R in partnership with the Modern Language Association and 13 academic libraries, focused on understanding the research and support needs of language and literature scholars. Just one quick housekeeping item. Please feel free to add questions and comments into the chat as we go along. Please use the chat that's in the Pathable platform rather than the Zoom platform to do that. And before I go any further, I want to especially thank the Modern Language Association for their partnership on this project. It's been really a pleasure to work with them, and thanks to Julie for organizing the panel. Ithaka S+R is a nonprofit research and strategy organization focused on serving the academic and cultural communities. In addition to a broad portfolio of work, we do deep dives into the support needs of both researchers and instructors in different disciplines and different thematic areas. So this project is the latest in that series. If you're interested in learning more about these types of projects and participating in the future, perhaps, please feel free to reach out to me about that. I'm going to briefly explain how the project worked before turning things over to my colleagues to dive into some of the findings. We collaborated with 13 academic libraries for this project, in addition to the Modern Language Association, so they are here. In the process of the project, we started by creating a semi-structured interview guide with the input of expert advisors, including Paula Krebs, who's the executive director of MLA. We then convened research teams from each of the collaborating libraries, as well as from MLA, in a 2-day workshop at Georgetown, actually, where we trained the teams in interviewing and in grounded theory analysis. Then we sent the teams off to conduct interviews at their home institutions to analyze the results and to write reports that spoke to the findings in a local context. Finally, Ithaka S+R gathered together all of the transcripts across the project and published a capstone report that speaks to recommendations for academic libraries, broadly speaking, as well as publishers and other vendors, scholarly societies, and other stakeholders in the space. And I want to just very briefly tease some of the findings from the capstone report, and then encourage you to go and read it for yourself. We found that language and literature scholars are unique among other humanities scholars in their affection for and preference for physical texts, both as objects of research in themselves and also as methods of discovery. So things like browsing the stacks are important in this field. Scholars in this field are generally unconcerned about, or at least uninformed about, the role or potential role of algorithmic bias in their discovery tools that they're using. So we thought that was interesting. The field is still grappling with the digital humanities. Interviewees were confused about what the definition of digital humanities is, and therefore confused about how it should be valued and assessed within the field. On a different note, public humanities, although still marginal to the sort of assessment of research in a traditional sense, is increasingly valued by the field based on a sense that the humanities has something to offer broader society, and that making that translation is important, as well as a feeling that graduate students need to be equipped to have a broader range of career choices outside the academy should they choose to go in that direction. So I will leave it there and turn things over to Julie from MLA.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie Frick-Wade, Associate Editor for the Modern Language Association International Bibliography, and I'd like to tell you about the findings and impacts of the MLA Report, Language and Literature Research in Regional Comprehensive Institutions, published at mla.org. Next slide. The MLA partnered with Ithaka S+R to understand how language and literature researchers conduct their research and to work with academic institutions to support this effort. The MLA assembled a team to conduct interviews with faculty at 16 regional comprehensive institutions across the U.S. and its territories, and to write a report on its findings. What are regional comprehensive institutions, and why were they the MLA's focus? Generally, they are public four-year colleges and universities that educate most of America's post-secondary students. They are not state flagships, nor research-intensive institutions, nor community colleges. They educate so many, yet are historically undersupported. By interviewing faculty at these institutions, the MLA ensured these researchers' voices were heard. Next slide. The findings of the MLA report highlight four major themes: public humanities scholarship, research practices, research workflow, and scholarly community. These findings are raising awareness of emergent and known issues, and the MLA is working to address them. Next slide. First, public humanities scholarship. Many scholars expressed a desire to reach audiences beyond academia, to have their work contribute to public life. Such engagement can generate support for the humanities, but public scholarship typically receives little weight in promotion and tenure decisions. The report finds an opportunity to develop guidelines for institutions to value public humanities scholarship and to provide resources for its support, and the MLA is responding in a number of ways. Next slide. The MAPS Leadership Institute was a month-long virtual event this summer that focused on public humanities. Sessions discussed the values of the humanities in the coronavirus moment, community-engaged teaching practices, and evaluation of public-facing work. The virtual summit for the future of doctoral education this November is rethinking graduate careers and culture. The MLA Conversation Series sponsors public and community conversations on the value and future of the humanities. It pivoted to an online format to present its sixth conversation in May, Is Higher Education Learning from the Pandemic? In July, the conversation was on Medicine, Narrative, Pandemic, and Power, followed by a webinar on careers in the humanities, and more. A new MLA ad hoc committee is working to make a difference. It is discussing ways to provide guidance to count public-oriented scholarship toward tenure and promotion to ensure this work is valued. Next slide. Next, research practices. Scholars at these institutions struggle to find and access the research materials they need. They have difficulty keeping up with the rapidly changing discovery landscape and with accessing resources beyond their home library collections. The report finds an opportunity for institutions to provide research tools and support services to train scholars to find accessible, trusted digital resources, and the MLA is responding through the MLA International Bibliography and free tools at mla.org. Next slide. The bibliography is a searchable online database, an essential tool for research in all aspects of modern languages and literature. With more than 3 million records of indexed resources, many discoveries are linked to the full text of publications online. Available through your library subscription to EBSCOhost, the bibliography includes a thesaurus tool to help researchers create more precise searches, and a directory of periodicals to help librarians build collections. MLA.org freely offers more than 30 tutorial videos in a variety of languages. These cover advanced searching techniques, searching subject areas, and more. A free online course, Understanding the MLA International Bibliography, is available at mla.org to teach students how to use this tool for research. Students work independently and earn digital badges for completion, making it ideal for remote teaching. 5 modules on subject area research are offered. Students learn to search for literary topics, film and video, folklore, linguistics, and rhetoric and composition. Another free service is the Field Bibliographer Program. The MLA recruits and trains volunteer specialists to index publications for the bibliography. These field bibliographers gain deeper knowledge of a specialty, exposure to new areas of inquiry, and sharper research skills. Fellowships are available. The MLA also sponsors internships. This past summer, 5 interns were trained online. All continue as field bibliographers, and 2 are teaching bibliography research skills to their classes. Next slide. Next, research workflow. Many scholars need tools to support the research workflow lifecycle from the academic writing process to publication. Many have found tactics to adapt, but there is no mass uptake of digital tools. The report finds an opportunity for institutions to provide resources to support the humanities scholars in holistic research workflows, and the MLA is responding through the MLA Handbook and Style Center. Next slide. Forthcoming in April, the 9th edition of the handbook helps writers at any level. It has chapters on formatting research papers, including using inclusive language, avoiding plagiarism, and more. The MLA Style Center is a website providing free tools for research and writing. Check it out at mla.org. Next slide. Finally, scholarly community. Many researchers discuss the importance of scholarly community against the specter of isolation. Some discussed digital groups on social media, while the conference remains a trusted form of community. The report finds opportunities to provide accessible online networks and to further the reach of conferences. The MLA is responding by advocating through governance, offering an online network, providing the convention online, and planning an international symposium. Next slide. The MLA Executive Council supports community through policy actions. This year, the Council issued statements on COVID-19 and academic labor, a statement deploring systemic racism, and more. The MLA Commons is part of Humanities Commons, supporting the scholarly community as an open access online network for collaboration and resource sharing. In March, the MLA created the Commons site, bringing your course online, to curate and share resources and strategies to help instructors shift to online teaching. The MLA annual convention is going virtual in January, and hundreds of sessions will take place online and allow new modes of participation. The convention creates a platform for exchange of ideas while ensuring the safety of the community. The 3rd MLA International Symposium is scheduled for June in Glasgow, with information forthcoming. Next slide. Through the many changes of the last year and changes that have gone before, the Modern Language Association continues to serve and advocate for the humanities. It is an institution that builds stronger networks and supports humanities research now, today, and tomorrow. To learn more, contact me, Julie Frick-Wade, check out mla.org, and drop by the Modern Language Association virtual booth where you can meet MLA staff. Download our resources file here or at the booth with links to the programs, events, and tools I've mentioned. Thank you. And now, Angela.
Okay, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to speak with everybody today. I'm Angela Courtney. I'm an English literature librarian at Indiana University. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and thanking my research team colleagues. Catherine Mentor. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Catherine Mentor and Luis Gonzalez. Their contributions were significant, and I'm grateful to them both for all of their hard work. In 2019, we conducted in-person interviews with 14 scholars on our campus. Our interviewees varied from junior to senior faculty. I would like to briefly discuss some of our findings and also mention some of the observations made during the study.
Next slide. Say next slide.
What?
Next slide.
Oh, next slide. Okay. I'll begin with some general observations about collections and collections use. Next slide. There's been a noticeable shift towards larger, generally our scholars described a shift away from narrow and traditional approaches to literary studies. There's been a noticeable shift toward the larger cultural studies as well as what defines a text. Our scholars expressed reluctance to rely exclusively on online access for primary sources.
Next slide.
Oh, next slide. Scholars were comfortable with online research using secondary sources, but expressed a preference for using physical monographs. Next slide. Print remains the preferred format for primary sources. We should continue to collect both text and continue to collect both non-text and primary resources as a rule.
Next slide.
Next slide. After a few, a few remarks about the idea of collaboration that came through the interviews.
Next slide.
Next slide. I was encouraged by faculty willingness to participate in the study. It allowed a revived discussion about potential collaborations with library. Also, as a result of the interviews, there were new opportunities to work with these scholars and with their students on class projects. Next slide. Since, wait a minute. Since the study was completed, the pandemic began, and there was a shift with embracing electronic books, at least in Bloomington. Next slide. Oh yeah, right here. Okay, sorry. Most scholars that I work with now insist on electronic copies of monographs. Since the study was, I did that. Okay, I'm sorry. Electronic copies of monographs. And,
read the last sentence.
Okay. And there's an increased need for librarian expertise in new and developed classes.
And you're done.
Oh, I'm done? Okay.
Thank you, Angela. Hi, my name is Melissa Jones. I'm one of the research librarians at Georgetown University Library. Along with my colleagues, Jade Madrid and Emily Goody, I had the opportunity to take part in the Modern Languages and Literature study these past couple years. With the few remaining minutes, I just want to highlight the major themes that emerged from our research and to take a deeper dive into one of those areas. You can go to the next slide. While I won't delve into each one of these themes, I wanted to at least give you a high-level sense of what the interviews revealed. The first theme, faculty research practices and perceptions, investigated how faculty develop their research topics, how their work fits into their departments, and whether they view their work as disciplinary or interdisciplinary. In collections and research support, we focused on faculty members' experiences and expectations regarding access to print and online collections, the services and librarians who support their research, and the challenges encountered with research support. In publishing vis-a-vis promotion and tenure, we examined the beliefs faculty members shared regarding their publications, particularly as they relate to annual merit and tenure reviews. And finally, in training needs and experiences, we summarized how faculty have built and maintained their research skills in an increasingly digital research environment, along with their expectations for graduate student research skills and the library's role in supporting them. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to focus in on what faculty shared with us about their training needs and experiences. The quote here illustrates some of the tension for our faculty. We live in a time of unprecedented access to information, but faculty sometimes struggle to keep up with new advances and new resources. Next slide. Our faculty revealed that most of their research methods were learned independently and often through trial and error in their doctoral programs. They have engaged in some ongoing continuing education through specialized summer courses and conference workshops on topics such as digital humanities and paleography. But there's still many things that they feel like they haven't been able to keep up with. They indicated a desire to know more about the resources available, search strategies, and digital methodologies. One interesting thing that we noted was that faculty were revealing something of a dichotomy between their own experiences, knowledge, and needs, and the expectations for their grad students. Next slide. In terms of their graduate students' research, faculty were very concerned that their grad students as digital natives were falling prey to intellectual laziness by leaning too heavily on internet search tools. Our faculty expressed a real desire to see their graduate students become well-rounded researchers, and they want them to be able to effectively search primary and secondary sources, to gauge source reliability, to historicize older sources and not dismiss them, and to navigate paywalls using library services. So as a whole, what we saw is that faculty wanted to see that both they and their graduate students were well balanced in their ability to use both traditional and emerging research methods, which was an interesting takeaway. You can go to the next slide. So our response as a library to this particular theme, the library established the Modern Languages and Literatures Implementation Team, drawing from across library departments with a charge to create a multi-year plan to bolster faculty research support. The team's initial focus is to develop faculty-specific workshops and identify and market pertinent special collections. And I should note that while our work on these particular 2 points began before the pandemic has definitely derailed things, and we need to get that back on course. Later, we're going to focus as a team on developing more customized outreach and training, and also building out a more extensive program for engaging and training our graduate students. So this concludes my remarks. I just really appreciate your time, and I'm actually going to pass this back over to Rebecca so that we can wrap up with the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Angela and Julie. If you would like to read more, including the reports that were referenced here, you can follow this link or look in our files tab. We may also be able to drop that link in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to us as well. We do have a good amount of time for questions, so I see one in the chat already that I'll throw out there, but please feel free to add additional questions that you may have in the chat. And please do that in the Pathable platform, if at all possible, rather than through the Zoom. We have a question for Angela and Melissa referencing a survey of academic libraries done by Ex Libris this past summer, saying that more than 98% of responding libraries identified teaching students research and information skills as a high or medium priority. So would either of you like to comment a little bit on how that's a priority at Georgetown or Indiana?
Absolutely. Obviously, teaching our students, both grad students and undergrads, is a very high priority for us. We're often partnering with faculty to find the best ways to reach our students. That might be through classes, it might be through individual research consultations. I know particularly we do a lot of focused outreach to our capstone and our thesis writer classes because they have intensive research needs. And during this pandemic, we absolutely want to make sure those services are still available. It's all still available, it just happens to be virtual now.
I can add a little bit. We do have groups that we work with who are sometimes interested in librarianship, sometimes just kind of curious, sometimes they just know they need some help. And every now and then we do get students who come to the librarians wondering if is there a class I can take to learn how to be a librarian? And, that always makes a librarian smile, right? So we're kind of on the lookout for that kind of thing happening all the time. And really, they only need to, stop by and, say hi. And it doesn't take long before they understand that, the office that you just walked into and asked us a question is going to be something that's really useful to you going forward. So that's always kind of exciting when that happens.
Thanks for that. I have a question for any of the panelists. We've been hearing a lot, I think, about what the new normal might be after COVID-19. I kind of want to flip that question and ask if there are any aspects that you see from your research of the practices, research practices of language and literature scholars that you expect will kind of bounce back to what they were prior to the pandemic when this is all over, fingers crossed. So any of the panelists who want to speak to that?
It's a good question. Oh, go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say that I think that the way things are going now for the folks who use our libraries, I think they're actually really sort of liking the changes that are kind of coming or are here for our sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that probably won't have changed because of the pandemic is, I know a number of people mentioned things about collections and how our language and literature scholars are still really in love with the printed book. I mean, they will use our ebooks and our data will show that they use our ebooks. But even in the midst of this pandemic, I'm often helping our faculty find alternatives for things that we only have in print and were only ever published in print. And so it's showing their continued need for those collections. And I do think that will continue, but I think we probably also will see a little bit warmer of an embrace towards ebooks that will continue afterwards.
We've got that. I think they're going to get used to it.
Yeah. They're slow to change, but change does happen eventually.
Let me throw in one other question that we got from John, who says they're a grad student in the humanities as well as a vendor rep for ProQuest, finding that some faculty are simply not up to date on what their library offers. So there's this disconnect there. This person wonders what MLA is doing as an organization to reach out to those faculty who teach in the humanities, especially with at schools who have struggles around budget.
I think that's going to be all of us right soon. There's just not enough.
Well, I think that one thing that the MLA is doing is reaching out like we are here today, and we have so many online tools that are available for free on the MLA website to help a researcher do the research that they need to do, or and to learn how to do substantive research using the MLA bibliography, which is available through your library subscription. So and it's such a powerful tool to find so many different kinds of research in the humanities, and so much of it is available online in a digital format. But it's even broader than that. The bibliography itself is it's been in existence for almost 100 years now, and started out as a print tool, but now is completely an online database of more than 3 million records. And there's just so much available there that we're hoping that more and more people at universities all over learn how to use the bibliography because of the extreme powerfulness of this tool.
Thanks, Julie. And our session time is officially up, but I think Charleston is allowing folks to hang around and continue the conversation for a little while after. So if there are additional questions, feel free to raise those. I know Melissa or Angela may have thoughts as well on that key issue of reaching out to faculty to make sure that they understand what resources the library offers. So we can continue the conversation as well.
Well, I know that was at the heart of what we want to do with our MLL implementation team, because of how programmed our faculty were this summer in learning how to be online instructors. We didn't want to continually inundate them with more online training opportunities, but we do want to think about ways that we can meet them where they are and make sure that they are able to keep abreast of new resources, keep abreast of new tools in a way that works with their schedules, but also in the same way that our students don't always like to admit that they don't know something, our faculty sometimes also don't like to admit publicly they don't know something. So creating the right kind of environments where they can come and be part of that scholarly conversation and part of that scholarly community in a way that also allows them to learn without putting them on the spot in a way.
I think that idea of conversation and community is so important, and that's something that we highlight in the capstone as well. The possibility of sort of leveraging those peer spokespeople for the library to help spread the word within their departments and their networks about what's available. We also have one other question, if our speakers are able. Sorry, I'm moving my screen so that I can see my other screen. That's why I'm wiggling around here. And the question is, how do humanities researchers feel about open access?
You know, it didn't come up in our interviews with them much. It wasn't that we steered clear of it, but it was less on their radar in terms of their own research. I think it came up more in terms of some of their participation in public humanities and digital humanities, things that have a more public-facing audience. But it's less on their radar, I think, than we would like it to be as librarians, especially knowing how library budgets are being affected by COVID and just other factors in our country. I think that's a really big area of possible outreach.
Yeah, I've never been asked that either, which is surprising when, considering the number of things that I have been that people have asked me to get. So this one, I'm surprised that this one hasn't happened yet.
I think it is true that languages and literature is still very much a monograph field. And for that reason, some of the open access debates are just less present in the minds of scholars in this field. They are publishing in journals, but there's so much focus on that book publication that it's maybe a little bit less on the radar than you might see in the sciences, for instance.
Yeah, I think that probably came out in a lot of our reports, just like the primacy of the book. It still is the gold standard for publication. It's still what gets them tenure. It's still what counts most for promotion. And we saw a lot that faculty were struggling to understand like where some of the more public-facing scholarship fit in to their research agenda, knowing that it doesn't count for a lot currently in terms of promotion, in terms of annual reviews. So there's some interest, but they also understand the systems they're working in. And so unless the systems of tenure and promotion change their standards, it kind of de-incentivizes some of that work on more public-facing projects. I see Julie nodding her head.
Let me see, we have actually some of our other project participants are chiming in, which is wonderful to see. IU's report includes a set of interesting recommendations regarding training for graduate students. Training for faculty was seen as less of a priority among interviewees. And someone else saying that in terms of open access, Carl says he agrees that they think in terms of communicating with different audiences rather than the publishing mechanics of open. So it's really, you know, they're thinking about their audience there, not to mention lack of grant funding to cover APCs. And a comment from Kelly, there are open access books, but faculty are worried that open access is still seen as less than for tenure. I'm going to give just a little breather here to see if any other comments or questions come in, but I think we are wrapping up at this point. This has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, Melissa, Angela, and Julie for the insights that you shared, and thanks everyone who engaged in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.